The White House, the ultimate symbol of American power. For over 200 years, it's been the official home of U.S. presidents. But here's the shocking truth. Not every president actually lived here. Some refused because it was under construction, some because it was destroyed, and others simply because they didn't like it. Today, we are diving into the fascinating history of every president who said no to living in the White House. Our story begins with George Washington, the very first president of the United States. Despite being the man who chose the site for the White House and oversaw its early construction, Washington never lived in it. Why? Because it wasn't finished yet. During his presidency, he lived in executive mansions in New York City and Philadelphia. So, the very man who gave the nation its first president's house never stepped foot in it as president. It wasn't until John Adams that the White House became a home. He moved in during November 1800, but the house was still incomplete. Imagine moving into a mansion with bare walls, no paint, and the smell of fresh plaster everywhere. Adams described the place as cold, damp, and uncomfortable. His wife Abigail even used one of the unfinished rooms to dry laundry. But unlike Washington, Adams at least got the title of first president to live in the White House. Fast forward to 1814, during the War of 1812. British troops stormed Washington, D.C. and set the White House ablaze. President James Madison and First Lady Dolly Madison were forced to flee. For the rest of Madison's presidency, he never returned to the White House. Instead, he lived in various houses across Washington, including the Octagon House. It took years to rebuild, and for that time, the White House was just a burned-out shell. When the rebuilding was complete, President James Monroe moved in, but only partially. The White House was still unfinished in many areas. Monroe himself admitted that some sections of the mansion were practically unlivable. He only used a few furnished rooms and left the rest empty, making his presidency one of the most unusual, half-lived experiences in White House history. Not every president avoided the White House because of fire or construction. Some simply didn't like it. For example, Chester A. Arthur refused to move in right away after President Garfield's assassination. Why? Because he believed the White House was old, outdated, and even bad luck. Arthur instead lived in the home of a wealthy friend in Washington until the White House was thoroughly renovated. One of the most dramatic cases was Harry S. Truman. By the late 1940s, the White House was literally falling apart. Floors creaked, ceilings sagged, and one chandelier nearly fell during a family dinner. Engineers warned that the building could collapse at any moment. So Truman packed his bags and moved across the street to the Blair House, where he lived for years, while the White House was completely gutted and rebuilt from the inside out. In fact, if Truman hadn't left, history might have recorded a president killed by his own collapsing home. Since Truman, every president has lived in the White House, but there have been moments of doubt. After 9/11, security experts even suggested moving the president permanently to safer underground bunkers. But so far, no modern president has refused to live there, though the tradition almost ended in the 21st century. So, from George Washington, who never stepped inside, to Truman, who had to flee a collapsing mansion, the White House hasn't always been the president's home. It's more than just a building. It's a survivor of fire, war, and time. And perhaps the real story isn't about the presidents who refused to live in it, but about the White House itself and its ability to endure. If you enjoyed this look into hidden presidential history, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because the White House has a lot more secrets left to uncover.